Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to another Random Thought Thursday. This Random Thought Thursday reading is titled, Am I Reading Right? Am I reading books correctly? This Random Thought Thursday was inspired by a discussion that I had in the comments section with Fraser Simons from the channel Fraser Simons Springboard Thought about the book Small Things Like These, which he and I have different opinions about. And I really enjoyed that discussion. One of the things that I really love and one of the things I miss about teaching is getting to talk with really smart young people about things and hearing their ideas and realizing, how much they know and how, anyway, I just really enjoyed the discussion. So thanks to Fraser for this, but you also have him to blame for the existence of this video. So, this question about whether or not I'm reading right kind of revolves around the idea of, am I reading more into books than is really there? Am I creating ideas and thoughts and storylines that the author didn't intend, and is that the right thing or the wrong thing? And so I just really started thinking about this, and the first thing I started thinking about is, why do I do this? What is it in me that causes me to, ascribe ideas to a novel or a book or work of fiction I've read that the author may not have intended? So I'm going to place part of it. I'm going to say part of this has to do with the way in which, at least I think, literature is taught in the United States of America, which is all about symbolism and themes and picking up on, the things the author's trying to do and analyzing and breaking it down. I think, even though I did resist a lot of that when I was in high school and college, I think some of that stuck, and I think that a lot of times when I'm reading something that I find myself doing that. Like if you went back and watched my review of Small Things Like This, I talk about the symbolism of the crows and maybe the symbolism of the river, and some of that just seems to be stuck in there, that I have this tendency to read that way. And if that's what I'm doing, I'm sometimes I'm seeing things as symbolic and thematic, which may or in fact not be that way. I think another reason for my interest in doing this has to do with the fact that, my educational training is as an historian, and so I have a tendency to want to know what the author's intent was. I am not one of those death of the author people. I'm just not. I want to know about the author. I want to know what, the author's life was like. I want to be able to see if I can find reflections of the author's life, of their experience in their works. And so, I spend a lot of time sometimes, not in the case of Small Things Like These, but I spend a lot of time, looking into and researching the authors. Faulkner would be a good example of this, so that I can kind of understand, I think, what Faulkner's writing about or what the story is about. And so I have this kind of, historian's interest. I already confessed that, one of the things that I like about reading is that I'm a know-it-all and I like to know things. So, I think I like to be one of those people who says, hey, did you notice this about this book? If you were in the Faulkner and August reading group, I became obsessed with the idea. We were reading the first two novels in the Snopes trilogy. I became obsessed with the idea that Faulkner intended for us to see Eula Varner as Brunhild from, the Germanic tales and things like that. And that I was really excited anytime there was a Wagner reference, anyway. So that's kind of the know-it-all in me that wants that. And so that, naturally leads me to ask myself some question. Is this just pseudo-intellectual crap that I'm engaging in? Is this just pretentious? Is this just me trying to seem smarter than I am? Am I, self-conscious about my lack of education in these areas and therefore, going too far? Anyway, so I question all these motives. I'm not exactly sure why I do this, but I have a feeling it's some combination in some proportion, like a recipe, of all those things. But what I would also say is that that's one of the things that doing that is one of those things that makes reading really enjoyable to me. Trying to figure that stuff out without going too far, A good example of that, and this is something that I've had arguments with my friend Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics about, and other people. In reading Ulysses by James Joyce, I kind of intentionally avoid secondary material, which tells me things about what Joyce intended. that I just want to be able to figure it out for myself, that I want to be able to either figure it out from the reading, or I want to be able to figure it out by doing, my own research, not into a book that kind of explains what, Joyce or Faulkner or, anybody else meant, in writings, or what Claire Keegan meant. For the same reason, I think I avoid watching interviews with authors of books about books about which I've developed ideas. I've developed ideas about the reading, about the meaning, about the characters, about what the author intended, and to a certain extent, I think I avoid watching author interviews or even reading author interviews because, I don't want to be wrong because, well, I am a know-it-all who may in fact be engaging in pseudo-intellectual, pretentious kind of discussion, and that may be right. I don't want that to be destroyed for me. So I think my motivation is that this is what I enjoy about reading. This is one of the things I like about reading. I like seeing the connections. I like knowing. I like picking up on the themes. I like knowing how the author's life may have influenced the work. But there's another thing here I think that is at work as well, and that is that when I'm reading something and the characters really connect with me, when I really connect with the characters, and I'm a character reader more than a plot reader, but when I really connect with the characters, they seem to exist for me beyond just the confines of the story. I have a tendency to think about the characters I connect with most not as real people. I'm not, out there imagining these people as real people, but as people whose existence, or as characters' existence, can go and I can extrapolate beyond what's on the page. Merid from The Colony by Audra McGee is a good example. Bill Furlong, obviously from Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, is an example. And I imagine, the consequences of their decisions. I imagine perhaps the motivations for the things they do. And I think I do that because these characters in some ways are really vivid in my mind, really make a connection with me intellectually, emotionally, and I invest more in them than perhaps, the author intended. So, one of the things that I thought about in this Am I Reading Right or Do I Read Wrong? I can't remember how I started this off. I've had several different titles. But one of the things I thought about then in this whole thing and wondering whether or not, I'm engaging in a kind of reading which is, not really wrong, but maybe motivated by the wrong things. One of the things that occurred to me is that I think that for all my, discussion about wanting to know and break down the stories and do historical research in the author, I think that at heart I'm an intuitive reader and not an analytical reader. What I do seems like analysis, but I'm really just intuiting things. I'm kind of guessing at motivation of characters without actually finding the hard evidence which necessarily supports that. I'm kind of, intuiting connections the author intends to make between their own life or between one work of fiction and another. And I'm intuiting, something that happens with a character from what I know about the author. And because I approach the works intuitively, but I intuit a lot, that means I'm probably wrong a lot. And what I'm reading and what I'm getting out of the novel, it may have nothing to do with the author's intent. Which then brings me back around to, if I'm reading into a novel something the author didn't intend, am I reading that novel wrong? And then I get back to the whole death of the author, because to be honest with you, I don't care. If the author would think I'm reading their novel wrong, if I enjoyed it, if it was intellectually, emotionally stimulating to me, then I'm not sure that I really care. And so I'm not really sure that it matters if I'm reading wrong, but this is Random Thought Thursday, and so I thought I would share these random thoughts with you about reading. I'd love to hear, your thoughts about how you read, how you approach reading. If you intentionally avoid reading too deeply, if you consider yourself an analytical reader or an intuitive reader, if you avoid the kind of books that create this problem, I want to hear from you too. Love to see your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for tolerating this random stream of thought from a late middle-aged man. And again, thank you for watching.